Well, hello and welcome to the latest edition of India Ideas, a show which is all about science and tech, innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm Gautam Roy. Today we're talking about EdTech during extended online schooling, because no one had ever really imagined that education in online mode would go on for this long. EdTech has seen a boom during this period, the COVID era. A small data set is that merely in the first half of 2020, Indian EdTech enterprises raised over $800 million. But what has been the learning so far over this extended period to make online schooling as effective and quality oriented as can be? Some would say as effective as offline, but why not more than that as well? And what challenges have emerged and how have they been tackled as well? To talk about all these issues, we have with us today Yashovardhan Poddar, co-founder of Open House, which is a Bengaluru-based edtech startup involved in experiential academic and extracurricular learning. We also have Shiv Matthews with us, Director Academic Operations, Vibgyor Group of Schools, which is over 40 schools nationwide with 55,000 students using online tools of learning extensively during the pandemic. And Surabhi Goyal is also with us, CEO of Aditya Birla Education Trust Schools, which is an institution with a school for students with learning difficulties, apart from a regular K-12 international school, as well as Teachers Training Academy. Welcome to you all. First, to you, Yashovardhan, in terms of, no one really thought how long would this extended mode of online schooling go on. To what extent do you think technology has helped in sustaining the engagement with students in this tough period across different screens?
No, thanks so much for having us here, Gautam. I remember in the beginning of 2020, one of my friends from China had called me and had told me that, hey, there's a looming crisis happening in China, and this is how they're responding to it from an education perspective. And he'd asked me, if he's seeing signals of that in India. And I remember completely dismissing the call and saying, India is very far away, we're very safe, and I don't think we'll have these kind of challenges. Sitting here today where we are, the four of us, I think it's been a very different year and a half for the entire country. But on technology, a lot of times, we read international magazines, New York Times, and we often look at the West and how they have used technology and how schools have used technology there. I'm sure out here, Surabhi will agree with me and Shim will. Indian schools were able to use mobile phones to conduct more than a year of 5 days a week, 6 hours a day classroom teaching. I understand, and we'll discuss at length, about the debate and what has worked, what has not worked. But I do feel, if you zoom out 10 years later, the fact that an entire country could learn for such a long time on just a device, I think has been a watershed moment for technology and its role in education. I'll let others comment.
Definitely. And Shim, clearly in terms of 55,000 students, your group of schools has 40 schools are there. Must have been a mammoth task. What all went into ensuring that? Well, I don't know if it was seamless or not, but you'll be the best person to tell us that learning remains seamless.
Thank you, Gautam, and all the panelists. As Yashovardhan mentioned about when this pandemic started, way back in March, I should call it way back in March 20, because it looks like a long period that we've been in this pandemic now, because we are talking about students and we are different kinds of learners, right? Across the Vibgyor Group of schools, while we had started with technology, but not the kind of technology that we were pushed into or thrown into. And I think it's not just limited to one school or a group of schools or this part of the country, but across the world, that's what we see. And we're talking about 250 million learners in India that are school-going students. And we talk about millions who take the CBSE examinations, lakhs of students who take the ICSE board examination. Of course, the Cambridge and IB are different. We had to, in fact, move out from a physical school scenario to an online scenario wherein you have to cater to different age groups. You're talking about preschool all the way till grade 12 and also catering to multiple boards. It was a challenge. We formed a core team. It was called a task force, and we had to work on the seamless movement from offline into an online mode. And also there are regulations that are there by the WHO, the CBSE, the NCERT have laid down guidelines about screen time. So we had to be careful about the kind of time that we would be able to focus and what would be taught in those many hours of schooling, where we had an average of 3 hours of school for, say, the pre-primary, moving on from primary, which had around 5.5 to 6 hours, to the senior secondary having about 7 hours. You now had to strategize to bring all of this learning down in limited time, so that you don't affect the physical conditioning of the child at any point of time. So we had to burn the midnight oil. It was, I would not call it seamless. Maybe it must have looked seamless for parents, but for us, it was a big jump and literally thrown into a pool where we had to work hard, to swim hard, to stay afloat, and that we did. And come April and May, we moved into the online mode for all our students across the country.
Wonderful, wonderful. That in itself must have been quite a journey, and then to take it forward, perhaps another story, and we'll ask you more about that as well. But in your case, we already have a K-12 international school, but I'm more interested in finding out about the online learning of children with learning difficulties, because the entire pedagogy there is quite different. They require a different sort of hand-holding. How is that done online is what I'd really like to know.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Gautam, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's such a pertinent point. Children with learning difficulties, of course, obviously find learning difficult in any case, even when it's a physical classroom. And at our school, we have an individualized learning plan for these children. So that really helped because it was like kind of trying to bring that program online. Of course, the attention span, the kind of engagement that these students would have online is very difficult. And I would confess that there have been dropouts in those cases because they rather just have a tutor coming home and working, one-on-one with those children because it's very difficult for us to engage them online. Having said that, we did break them up into even smaller groups and had the therapist, trying to work with them or teachers working with them. We also really relooked at our timetable to see, how we can have shorter screen time or shorter duration of engagement with them, giving them frequent breaks, getting them to come back. If there's a child who was just not engaged, we would happily do a lesson with this person even on a Saturday. So, it was literally customizing it for every child to make sure some kind of learning happens. I think the good thing that happened is finally the parents realized what a lot of effort goes into actually keeping these children engaged. And they truly became partners and stakeholders. And we were only able to do this with the tremendous amount of support of all the parents as well. And parents became counselors.
Yes, as a parent of a 9-year-old myself, I know something of what you're talking about, but not all. Well, just tell us, Yashovardhan, in terms of what Open House does, how does it really aid this process of movement online of students who've been, they were part of conventional offline schooling and then everything moved online. You guys, I believe, also had to move online from an offline mode yourself.
Right. I think I'll share about what we are doing presently. I think it will be very exciting for people to understand. When schools shut down, for the first 3 or 4 months, every school principal or teacher, even the students, were more worried about, can we just have instruction happening? So the challenge for a principal would be, or for a school would be that how do I make sure a math class actually does take place? So we were talking last year, 2020, let's say, right after summer holidays, people had migrated to Zoom, people had migrated to every teacher should have their own device, some training, and then classes would start. Come September, October, November, what people started seeing the most was that schools don't only play the form of instruction. School is a very social place where children spend every day of their life. They make friends, there's friendships, there is competitions, there is extracurricular activities. And in many ways, that is the rhythm that keeps them coming back every day and those relationships and those bonds. And what I realized along with my friend Akshay is that is the entire world will solve for the instruction problem of education. And many schools I think have done a very good job on their own. We felt that schools may not be able to answer the social part of the school, the community aspect of the school. That how do you and I, who are both, let's say, debating enthusiasts, meet each other online? How do some children, let's say, who want to explore theater, find each other online, continue to grow that side of their personal side? So we felt at Open House, we can work with schools to first develop the curriculum and then further enable even the entire experience of what we call, the extracurricular world for the schools. And I find that, had it not been for the pandemic, not just schools or parents or children, but even we ourselves would not have realized the beauty behind, the socio-emotional side of a child and how it needs to be addressed. That's a brief introduction to our world.
Okay, wonderful. Shim, in terms of how education is imparted in our country, some of the curriculum, of course, there is a bit of a free hand, especially at the more junior levels. But as you go along into middle school and then to the higher secondary level, up to the K-12 level, then it becomes very board-driven, very say NCERT at the central level, and then of course CBSE curriculum comes in, and the kind of free hand that schools might have, at the earlier stages, they don't have later on. So to orient all this to an online mode, what kind of an initiative do you think there could be? For example, there were the board exams which got cancelled, to take this forward into the future where you might not have physical exams even further on. What kind of an arrangement do you think technology can help evolve to tackle the situation?
Very interesting question, Gautam, there. And I think this has been a struggle, taking on from what, in fact, Surabhi mentioned, because there's one group of students who literally need that kind of attention. And, we may call them children who are having some form of disabilities, or we call them differently abled. And taking on from what Yashwardhan was mentioning about moving into a technology space. Now, there are two kinds of people. Some, those who fall in those two spectrums. One is tech savvy, and somebody who is not tech literate. Luckily we have in this generation who we call as digital natives. So they are far more acceptable, or rather they accept technology far more quickly than anybody else, maybe say in my generation for that matter. Unfortunately, we also have a large list of teachers who fall into the category where they might not understand technology. They might be older teachers, excellent teachers in the offline mode, in the classroom, but not necessarily in the online mode where they struggle with technology. Having said that, the movement to an online system of not just teaching but also assessment is something that is still that we are dabbling with. As you rightly mentioned, the CBSE, the ICSE had to call off their examinations, cancel off their examinations. Even this year, 1 year after we have been through this pandemic and this trauma for children, to take an exam or not take an exam and then finally wait for the boards to take a decision is pretty traumatic. The psychological and emotional part of it is something that we'll never know now. It will take over a period of time, as we call anything that's got to do with mental health is a silent...
We'll get to know when the results come, maybe.
Yeah, it's a silent epidemic that's happening inside the child, and people might not speak about it. But yes, Gautam, we need to move faster. There are examinations that are being proctored, and at WebGyor, we try to make use of a proctored examination system where the secondary students would, who are able to understand technology better, use it better, get into a proctored mode of assessments, and that's how we started assessing the students and then grading them. But of course, it doesn't work perfectly the way we would want it to be, like in an offline mode. So those are challenges, but I think as a country that's known for innovation, we'll have to really work faster so that our students who are at home would be able to take examinations from home and not be under the pressure of exams not happening at all. You cannot be just left in the lurk and then somebody else decides for you, we got an exam or we don't have an exam. That creates a lot of psychological trauma which people forget to understand. We need to
Definitely, but our young ones are resilient, and I'm expecting that they've made good use of the time that they've got to take some pressure off and then move on to do things that they're really focusing on. But Surabhi, what is your take on this debate which has been revived once again, the one-time all-important examination versus continuous evaluation and assessment, and now of course talking about the online factor as well?
The NAP, the policy that was released last year, has already emphasized the need for low-stake continuous assessment in place of high-stake end-of-the-year exam. We need exams which test students' conceptual understanding and cognitive learning and reduce the stress and give them that preparation time. So in any case, I think schools need to start looking at options, how we rethink the pedagogy, what we teach, how we assess. We don't know how long the pandemic will last. India is a large country. I don't see students getting vaccinated or, anytime soon, which means we may have the hybrid model for a very long time. perhaps half the students will come in, the other half will study out of home. We will have to quickly train the teachers to use EdTech tools to look at alternate ways of assessing students on a continuous basis. And all this is obviously only possible if we can bridge the digital divide, as well as frantically, like I said, train the teachers. Now, I'd like to bring out this example. The CBSE has recently proposed that for the board exam, for the first set, there's going to be a 90-minute MCQ, which will be held sometime in November, December. It will cover 50% of the syllabus. This will be case-based. Now, I want to, ask, are the teachers really training the students to study in this way? Or are the paper setters actually trained to set the papers accordingly? Because this is such a huge paradigm shift from the way we've been doing things in the past.
Okay.
And honestly, I hope once the crisis is behind us, we don't really go back to the format of assessments that we were doing. So I think this is a great, Winston Churchill said, do not waste a good crisis. So I hope we continue with these learnings really.
Certainly, and we'll have to see how the situation evolves. Depends on, what are people talking about the third wave possibility of that, and much else. Let's not really go there, because that is not something that we want to remind people of at this stage. But Yashovardhan, in terms of how things have been going with the teachers, because Subhi mentioned teacher training as well. You have teachers on your platform. That is something that is your monetizing strategy. It's part of that as well. You take a part of what they earn through their tuitions, and that is what is perhaps keeping you going, apart from the money from your funding, which you haven't disclosed too much about. But what do they find challenging themselves, the teachers,
Yes.
in terms of shifting to the online mode, and how do they resolve it?
Actually, I want to just take a minute on the assessment side first, and it actually ties back to how teachers even teach. I think the micro assessment style and what we're calling continuous assessment actually is a wonderful place to be. And even teachers find that more interesting as a way of teaching and getting to know their children. So oftentimes when we talk about assessments, we think from our perspective on how to assess a child. But a teacher has to be teaching the same group of people with the online difficulties every day. Sometimes it's a difficult topic, sometimes it's an interesting topic. So micro assessments really allow the teacher to understand the pace of a class. And in India, most schools are not going to have small format or like a very small group children. So we're looking at a teacher looking at anywhere between 20 to 40 children. So micro assessments allow the teacher to judge the pace. Even within that, what we did last year, and on MCQs, we started working on this last year in the month of August itself. What we realized is you can gamify some of these quizzes. You can create incentives on how children are, let's say, performing on these quizzes, how they can be becoming smaller teams in a live class. So in sometimes one of our classes, let's say on Fridays, the teacher will say, hey, let's use 20 minutes just to have a live quiz. You might be aware of Jeopardy as a game, right, Gautam? It's a very well-known, what we had KBC in India, Jeopardy is very common in the US. We took that idea of gamified quizzing and brought it to our class. And I think for teachers also, what many people don't realize, they're looking for the right tools, the right excuses to have a more engaging classroom, because that gives them that fuel to keep teaching every day. And I think for us at Open House, that has been a very interesting journey on how to train the teacher in an interesting way so that they want to be motivated. So it's not just the child's motivation, it's the teacher's motivation.
The death of learning. That is clearly something that should not be there at all. But I believe that you're also votary for some sort of metric evolved through technology being applied to assessing extracurricular or co-curricular activities as well.
Yeah. So there are two things here. One is now what we're doing extracurriculars when we work with schools. The first metric we came up with is called classroom health. So now most of our children are working on our own platform. We don't use Zoom anymore. And we've taken a leaf even from the AI developments in China. I think they definitely are doing a fantastic job there. How a child is engaged in a live class is also a symbol of how the teacher and how the class is moving forward. So I'll share a very small one. If you see in any class, if the videos are on versus off, you know how the engagement and how the class is going. The moment you see the teacher starts becoming boring, the classes start becoming a little bit more, let's say, monotonous, the children will vote with their videos. They will turn it off. And we've basically used many such cues on the chat platform. How often are they communicating on the chat with the teacher? Are they asking the right questions? We use some of these cues to come up with a classroom health score. It's still not perfect. I still think it's in its earliest days, and it will take us maybe a couple of years and a lot of data to get there. On extracurricular, I would say it's a bigger debate in terms of how do you assess children for extracurricular. But I'll use an example of, let's say, drama. And by the way, Gautam, I was reading your background that you yourself in your earlier days were an extracurricular enthusiast in your college world. If you take, let's say, drama or performing arts, right, you can break it down into many smaller parts. Enunciation is a topic on its own. Facial expression is a topic on its own. Body language is a topic on its own. So, of course, Open House is one entity, and we are trying our best to take the first step in this world of extracurriculars.
Okay.
But over the next couple of years, I'm sure schools, councils will all have to come together and say, hey, let's find the right ways to modularize performing arts, modularize singing, creative writing, entrepreneurship at a child level, and then we'll build micro assessments on those topics. So it's not as much as, let's say, just a theory paper in mathematics or physics. It will be a mix of performances and micro assessments.
Shin, what do you believe would be the best way forward here, so that students themselves feel motivated because they have a competitive spirit? But sometimes that can also be, if you're not performing to the level of some other at a percentile level, then it can be a demotivating factor as well.
Gautam, how much ever we speak about different modes of assessments or promoting a culture within the classroom in an online mode that would make the child as active as we want them to be. And Yashwardhan did mention about teacher getting boring and the students going off the screen. These are all natural things that we see across our schools in the country, and we can't run away from them. Now, this is based on the small sample size of schools that have the access to internet, or students who have access to internet and regular class, teaching and learning. Now, in our school, we have 7,000 teachers across the country. What becomes critical for us is to induct, orient and train our teachers on a standardized platform wherein they execute and implement what we want them to basis the vision of the organization. That is good teaching and learning, critical thinking, of course, all the 21st century skills. And Surbhi did mention about NEP, right? The skills, it's going to be very skill-based teaching that get rolled out over the next so many years whenever it gets implemented. It's beautiful, something that should have come at least a decade or two back. But yes, we'll have to keep the students engaged. The learner has to be engaged. In fact, I'll just tell you that the feedback that we always get from our senior secondary students every year when we did a 365-degree appraisal of our teachers was the word engaged. They wanted the teachers to engage them as much as they could, and that was sometimes in the red. So what we understand is, in this online scenario, which is not easy at all, I can tell you, you have to keep your learner challenged. And the best way to do it would be to break it down into smaller bits of teaching and learning that keeps the child motivated and interested in the classroom. Of course, incentives is a different story, but coming back to the truth, the fact is that we've got to engage them for the next so many hours in a classroom, which is sometimes very monotonous because it's only online. You don't touch, you don't feel. None of those senses come into play except your visual senses or your maybe auditory senses. So it's a challenge. However, I think induction, training, orienting, and taking everybody through what needs to be done for the child, in the best interest of a child, is what really comes to the bottom of it.
And there's, of course, will be concern about screen time, the impact on eyes, attention spans, glazed eyes, posture, issues related to feeling isolated. All those concerns are very valid. So do you think with time those will also be addressed, perhaps with the help of technology?
So Gautam, I know that Yashwardhan and so many others are doing such a fabulous job trying to integrate technology, making sure we have some kind of schooling going on. But and there has been a lot of disruption in the higher secondary and at the university level. But I do believe that the K-12 space is such that it requires a nurturing environment. We need our students to come physically back to school. Yes, the way we deliver the curriculum and the pedagogy, like I said, I hope we manage to carry forward all the learnings that we have. But the mental health issues that the students are going through, the loneliness, all of that cannot be addressed. So, we will, to an extent, have to really look at making sure that the children come back to school. There have been some strategies that, of course, we've used, to ensure that screen time is limited. We really looked at a timetable, like I mentioned, having 2 lectures and a compulsory break. We've trimmed down the, syllabus focusing only on, the most important concepts. We've urged parents to ensure that the students are not on the screen apart from, the school time, which is very difficult because they're poor things.
Yes, very difficult.
So they're, stuck on the TV all the time. But having said that, with the use of edtech tools and a change in the pedagogy, which is, say, maybe adopting flipped classroom, so that the students can watch pre-recorded asynchronous lessons or read the lessons and then come face to face only for discussions and debates and, doubt clearing. That really is the way forward, pandemic or no pandemic, So that's what I really think about.
Yes, definitely. Asynchronous learning, that component can be enhanced. You wanted to come in, Yashowardhan. I have 30 seconds for you. I have to wrap it up.
I want to say textbooks are at serious risk post-pandemic. YouTube and many other modules like this have become children's favorite tools, and you'll see a lot more of work happening there in the next 10 years.
Okay, great. That is a great conversation to have. Gives me some hope that my own 9-year-old will be learning in a good environment, or even though if it's not physical for some time to come in the near future, but back to school is what we would really prefer, even at this stage. Although technology is trying to sort out the issues with online learning as well. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.